Welcome to episode 53. Happy Friday to all of you. And we have a very special guest today as we're really excited to talk about the trainer of the trainers, and that is Mr. Jake Salisbury. Welcome, my friend.
Thank you so much, Matt. I really appreciate you allowing me to come on board and just on your platform and get to communicate with your community and make connections and talk about some really cool topics. It's just awesome. I'm grateful. Very, very grateful.
Well, I have to tell everybody, because I know that we're going to have people tuning in from all over the world. What's great about this is, as competitors or former competitors, trainers, personal trainers, corporate trainers, general health and wellness, you tend to meet people who, when they cross your path, they're meant to cross your path for a reason. And for those of you who don't know, Jake is a very highly accomplished individual, not only in the personal training space, but also on stage, as well as in family life too. And we train at the same gym. I happened to be popping by one day, and we struck up a conversation in between sets. And that tends to happen with guys who are like, dude, you're looking pretty lean, you're looking pretty big, and you're lean and big, and you're not even competing anytime soon. So let's talk about really why you chose personal training, or how that chose you. What is your background, and why did you get that interest?
Absolutely. And first of all, thank you very much for the compliments on being accomplished in both personal life. That's a big one. A lot of people don't talk about being accomplished in your personal life or with relationships and family, and that's huge. And that tells me a lot about your values as well. As for your question, when it comes to kind of what brought me to personal training or what brought me to fitness, very good question. And it was a long journey. It was a long journey that started really young. I've been practicing fitness now for 16 years, and I'm 28. So it's a big chunk of life, and it's been a great 16 years. I'd say professionally, about 11 years now, helping people professionally for 11 years, and my story is a little different. It was unique. I have neurological disease. And Tourette Syndrome, to be specific. And most people wouldn't guess, because I'm pretty good at talking or, having fun, getting involved in social situations, but it's not always been that way. And when I was diagnosed when I was about 9 years old, and I was having some really severe issues, a lot of macroscopic twitches. So anybody who suffered from Tourette Syndrome, you may have seen a few different variations, but if you've ever seen anyone with a tic, like where their eyes twitch or their mouth twitches, or maybe they have an uncontrollable tic in their body, that can be a form of Tourette's. It's very similar to Parkinson's, and it's in that family of neurological diseases. And I have that. And mine was a big, large muscle group twitching. That's how it started. And that was just one of many issues that came from it. Well, it turns out I got really lucky. I was a part of a very small population that food and activity were the main prescription to regulate my neurotransmitters in my brain. And that was groundbreaking at the time. This is well over 10 years ago. Nutrition was never even thought of as something to fix medical conditions. Nutrition's still a new frontier for medical treatment and adjusting food. And so this was way ahead of its time. A lot of people were being prescribed Ritalin, Adderall, any kind of regulator under the sun to control this disorder. And I was having some really severe issues. I couldn't read and write. It was extreme. So the Tourette's was just one part of it. The frontal lobe of my brain, the left side, was underdeveloped on an MRI, and I was having a lot of social and behavioral issues. I could not read and write very well. I was writing most letters backwards and juxtaposed, like dyslexia, but in a very extreme form. There were some serious problems going on, and it all related back to dopamine and serotonin just being erratic and so out of place that the neurons were not developing properly. And the neural pathways were not being developed. So it was a combination of behavior and chemistry. And so this is what started everything for fitness for me, because pretty much we were having these horrible issues. I was non-functional. I was in special education. They thought that maybe I couldn't even drive without my mom in the future as I got older. They thought I'd be living with my mom my entire life because I was so non-functional as a child. It was hard. It was very, very hard. In my mother's journey, it was very hard. And so we went to this doctor, and the first one tried to just throw medications at us. And many people have that story. Many people have been in that seat, but they didn't go through the same process I did. I looked at my mom, and she was like, "Hey, do you want to take these?" Because I'd seen, even though I'd struggled in school and I was having troubles intellectually or cognitively, I was still a smart kid in some ways. And I saw what some of these other kids were going through, and I just looked at my mom and I was like, "No, like I don't want anything to do with those." Like they were like zombies, you know, because of how those medications were affecting them. So my mom and I took a different path. We found a neurologist who had a friend who was a nutritionist. They teamed up, and then they said, "Hey, maybe he's part of this small group that we've heard about." So next thing you know, I find myself on an elimination diet. I'm eating basic protein and vegetables as a 9-year-old. You know, so like we were a classic American family. We had boxed foods, ice cream, ramen, corn chips, and ketchup. You know, like it was the worst. And but so here I am, and my mom, we're like, "What's nutrition? Like, what is that?" And so we're presented with this treatment plan, and pretty much what the doc said was, you need to eat clean and exercise the rest of your life. And so we started with the elimination diet, and immediately my symptoms began to go away. Like within days, the tics started to calm down because my systemic inflammation started to calm down from a switch over to foods. It wasn't, I mean, it was extreme enough. It wasn't gone by any means. That took years and years for it to go away. But it was significant enough to say, there's something here. There's something here. And so we followed that path. I would say it was a very hard path for a 9-year-old to figure out, you know, you're different. You're taking your food to school. You're taking chicken and broccoli where all the other kids are eating mac and cheese and soda. And it was hard. It was very hard. And I didn't level out and become normal. I would say normal. And what I mean by that is my cognitive skills were not up to par until about 14 years old.
Wow.
It took me many years of cognitive training. I went through special classes, special work with people to reteach my brain how to read, how to do math, how to understand spatial relationships between things. Like an apple, a single apple means the number 1. You know, this represents an object in the universe, right? That's what 1 means. And then I split the apple in 2, and that means 2, or that means half, right? And my brain had a lot of trouble with that. And so through the phenomena of neuroplasticity and the fact that our brains are fucking awesome, I was able to heal over time through years and years and years of doing the same thing every day, eating clean food that was very basic and simple. And I started working out lightly when I was 9, just walking around the track with my mom. And then by 10 and 11, I was looking over the track, and here's where my lifting career really started. Is, you know, I'm still struggling with Tourette's and social issues at this point greatly, but I'm walking around this track at a gym in Tyler, Texas, and I look over and I see this guy. His name is Todd Hunter. He's 6'4", former NFL player for the Panthers. He's just a monster. And I look at my mom, I'm like, how do I do that? And
sure, your mom was just excited to tell you.
yeah, right. Yeah, I remember the look on her face. She's like, how do I know? No, I don't know. Like, I don't know how to get that big. Like, he was so big. He was such a big, muscular guy, like 340 with abs, like just big. Well, she said one thing that stuck with me for the rest of my life. And I always say it to any of my clients today as a coach. If you want what they have, you do what they do. And that's all my mom had to say. And that opened up my world. That moment forward started my journey in training and in heavy weightlifting. And so I went down there and just I was lucky enough to fall under the wing of some really great old school lifters that knew how to put in hard work. And yeah, they were rough around the edges, but they taught me a lot, and they taught me how to work really hard and the basics of the big three: bench, squat, deadlift, and get down there and sweat a lot and work hard. And it just progressed from there. And I just started asking more and more questions. And I competed. So I turned into a strength athlete. And I got my first coach, came in from Las Vegas. He was a construction guy, and he'd trained with some of the greatest power lifters, Ed Cohen and Ernie France. And he came down from Las Vegas in this little town, Tyler, Texas. And he saw me. I was over there like 13 or 14 stiff leg deadlift and 315 for reps. Right. I don't know. I was just touch and go. I didn't know what I was doing. I was just working hard. And he scooped me up under his wing and started taking me to the gym every day after school. And he was coach. He was my first captain. I'll do what you say. And from there, I competed in strength sport until I was about 21 or 22. I got very strong and had some injuries towards the end. And that's what spurred that transition into bodybuilding. Was I wanted to find something that was equally, if not harder to do. I didn't know anything about bodybuilding. Like I was that guy that would just eat a bunch of food, clean food, but I would eat a bunch. I was thick, I was big, and I was strong. And I saw those guys with the six pack, and I'm like, yeah, I don't need it. It was great though. Like, I mean, I had a lot of respect for what they did, but I didn't know anything about it. I was just the guy that was strong. And so I couldn't lift like I used to because I damaged my hip severely. I ripped my labrum and tore up my PCL. I tore my PCL. And, a lot of people who've been lifting a long time have suffered from some injuries like that. And so I wanted to find an alternative path that was still really challenging. And that's what changed my whole direction into bodybuilding. I had a friend of mine, Tommy Keever, came up, and I was, probably 21, going on 22. He just done his first show. He looked phenomenal. He was in his 50s and he's got that grainy look. So cool. And he came up, he's like, Jake, why don't you do a show? And I was like, what's a show? And talk to me about it. He's like, I'll tell you what. He's like, I'll do my second show if you do your first. I looked at him. I was like, okay, challenge accepted. And I was 246 pounds at the time and got down and competed at 209, and I won the Branch Warren. And my first show right out the gate in Classic in the 212 division.
So what year was that?
I want to say that was, what are we in 2022 now? So maybe somewhere in 2017 to 2019. I'd have to look back at photos, but somewhere in that zone. If I were to guess. Again, it's been a little while because I took a couple years. It's been a couple years since I've competed now. I've been growing and putting on size. But I did 2 or 3 shows consecutively back to back year by year. And the Branch Warren was my first. And so I think that one was, I think it was 2017. Yeah. But again, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, the reason why I ask is because, when we interviewed Branch Warren, he was talking about, and he was on this podcast, and he talked about tearing his quad off the bone, literally stepping off of a curb at a restaurant, and he still managed to be 3rd place in the Arnold that year. And I mean, Trish said, no, you're going to do the show. He's like, I don't know if I should. And he managed to do it. So interestingly enough, when you talk about, tearing your labrum, your PCL, you still managed to get through something. You became aesthetic. And, one of the things I wanted to say before you continue was, a lot of people say for those who can't teach, And I kind of thought, well, you know what? For those who have done teach, and I think there's a big difference when you talk about your mentor, because this is a guy who's doing it. He takes you under his wing. He's going to do his second show. You do your first. Continue on. So you did the branch. You actually came in at 209 in the 212 division. Keep going. I love this. This is great.
Yeah, no, it's a ton of fun. I came in at 209, and for a first show, I learned a lot. There was it was a very hard prep. It was aggressive. I dropped very quickly, and I would say about 40 pounds in 10 weeks. It was one of those really harsh, like nonsense crash diets. Like most bodybuilders end up going through that at one point in their career when they don't quite know enough to do something otherwise. This gentleman, Tommy Keever, he's the one who invited me to do a show, but he wasn't the guy that kind of guided me through the diet process. He linked me up to his diet coach, who at the time, in a local city was kind of everyone was like, hey, go to this guy. Totally cool. Totally cool. All the respect in the world, would never, ever down talk anyone. I just know that as I've learned over the years, it was I was in a tough position, and calorically things were not managed as well as they could have been. And, and that was my fault. I didn't take the time to educate myself. I didn't take the time to take the extra steps and do some extra research and be like, hey, maybe this isn't the best idea. But, being a good soldier, yes, sir, and dropped a ton of body fat very quickly, lost a lot of muscle mass. I can tell you I lost a lot of mass, but I was carrying enough, luckily, to still maintain a good build by the time that I got down to stage weight. And so at 209, I came in, I would argue, for my first show, probably close to a dry 7%. A dry 7%. I could have, I think, nationally, we're seeing guys, touch very low fat percentage, but like true 5% on stage dry. Like I know people say 2%, 3%. That's a very subjective world, but I would argue DEXA scan, probably somewhere around like 5%. You're seeing these national guys that are just a bone dry 5%.
And grainy too. Grainy and striated.
Yeah, grainy. They look incredible. And I think I came in at a very dry 7%, very flat. And I didn't quite hit my peak the right way, but I still, did the best I could. And one of the, speaking of Frank Zane, one of my favorite of all time posers. And it just, unbelievable. Unbelievable. Just one of my favorite physiques, ideal in my opinion. Yes, I know that there are some people that hold a lot of size, but Frank Zane embodied what it means to move smoothly on stage and presentation, balance. And so I actually looked to him throughout my entire first show prep and watched his videos. And I modeled a lot of my on-stage activity after Zane. And I got lucky enough that at the first show, I think one of the guys that was backstage helping to coordinate everything, he was a dark-skinned gentleman, really, really nice. He came up to me after I did my first on-stage appearance, and he pulled me aside and just kind of shook my hand, and he said, we need more young athletes like you he's like, you look like a young Zane. And that was the compliment of compliments for me, just because of the way that I was trying to model my physique. I'm much bigger now, but at the time, like I was trying to model my physique after Zane. And I loved his posing and I loved his look. It captured the right image for me. And so to get that happen to get that compliment at the first show, I was like, whoa, like what? It was so cool. So that was a great experience for me. It was a huge rush. And to clarify, I didn't win overall. I won my open division. And just to clarify, yeah, I won my open division because there's a big difference. Definitely a big difference. And the guy that won overall looked phenomenal. He was much older than I am. Had a very mature look. So, hands down, just crazy detail. And so for me, I got lucky in that I brought something nice. And to walk in and win both the open and novice, I was very happy with that. Like I took first in both. And it's rare because usually when the guys that win novice, they don't want you to also win open because it looks kind of weird. But it just depends. It depends on who you ask with that. But but it can look a little weird. But I guess I just brought in something good enough that they were like, nope, he's the one. He gets it, and I was happy with that. I was very grateful for that. So second show, after the first one, I got to meet a lot of nice people, connect with some judges and that community, and I actually didn't have an off season in my second show. I was going into this. I was going to go into the special forces for military. I'm a military brat. Dad's a 22-year vet, Army, and I was going to go down. So I was getting in military shape. So you come off any kind of pharmacology, anything along those lines. So I got a little lighter. I was down probably naturally about 215 pounds at about 10%. Right, for me, that was still holding a lot of muscle mass. For someone that was going to the military, I was heavy. I was like, oh man. So it didn't work out, but I did not put on muscle mass. So went straight into another show. That didn't work out for me, that path, trying to take that path. So I went straight into another show, came in at 195. So from 209 to 195, but I would say about 1% leaner. And I'm at that weird height. Like I could, if I dip down a little bit and I reweigh, I can do the 205 division. And so I actually competed 205 and I took second at the Phil Heath. And that was fun. And that show was, I was happy, but at the same time, I went against a guy. We didn't have enough competitors in the flights between 205 and 212. They combined the division.
Oh boy.
And at 195, I went against my friend Joey, and he in his offseason, he was 240. It was huge. Like at the time, I barely hit 215 before I started cutting, and I was like, oh my God, like I gotta go against this guy. So I took second to Joey, and actually he was really amazing about the whole thing because afterward he actually did a post, and he was like, this dude's the winner. He's like, because between the two of us, like our physiques were very different in shape. But he was just so much bigger, man. He was so much bigger. I was drier. I was leaner, a little more, arguably you could call it like a little more classy looking, whatever. Everyone's different. It's such a subjective sport. But Joey was huge. He was huge, and he won. And he got first. So that was my second show.
Well, I want to pause there for a second because a lot of you who are watching, because we have people from all over the world watching right now, and I see these comments and these hearts and these likes going up. What's crazy is, for those of you who don't know, the two shows that Jake's already just talked about, the Branch Warren and the Phil Heath are the biggest in Houston and some of the biggest in the country. So you're literally seeing hundreds of athletes and you're waiting your turn to get back on for finals. You're having to put your feet up and lay down. You're having to go against guys who travel in nationally for these shows. So this is not just like a local show where people show up and say, hey, I'm going to do a 10-week prep. Let's hop on and see what we can do. You're competing against some of the best in the country, and you're taking top spots there. So go ahead. I wanted to crystallize that because you trusted in your coach and said, look, yes, sir, no, sir. And I think we'll talk about coaching. We'll talk about the state of bodybuilding. Tell us about, kind of how you're finishing up your journey on the stage and how your third show went.
Yep, absolutely. Absolutely. And thank you. And I agree. You're right. They're huge shows. I think the Branch Warren, the first one, was about 500 plus competitors. The Phil Heath was a little bit smaller than that one at the time, just in the classic anyway. And then my third show was another one that was massive because it was the first show coming back from COVID. It was the first show of the season, the USA Southwestern. And so that one was, I want to say it was either Houston. I think it was Houston or Dallas. I'm trying to remember. It's been a while. I see Colt. Colt, thank you so much, buddy. Thank you so much.
Colt Carroll.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. He's amazing. He's an amazing athlete. And so the third show, USA Southwestern, I did have a solid off season. I got up to about 237 pounds, relatively lean in the off season. Came in at 206. 206, probably my best physique yet. Hands down, best physique, best balance. I did bring a really dry condition as well. I missed my peak. I missed my peak by about 2 hours, which that is so hard. And it happens to probably every bodybuilder's been there. That gets the opportunity to compete is they probably end up missing their peak somewhere along the line. I missed my peak, but I had a great time. I took second at the USA Southwestern out of about 550 athletes. Another really good one. And the guy that I went against, his name was Colby. We were neck and neck. He had amazing quads. I was definitely beating him from the back. I outsized most of my competitors from the back. My quads have always been my biggest weakness up into the past couple years. And this was an interesting show because there was so many competitors. It was unexpected. They, at the time, they thought that maybe they would only get about 100 competitors because it was opening up from COVID. And nobody knew the state of affairs, the state of the country. We were all in panic mode. They'd already canceled multiple shows up to that point. And so, like, I was sitting on an edge. I'm like, are they going to cancel this one? Like, nobody knew. Nobody knew what was going to go on. And so all of a sudden we all get there and it's just flooded. Like, there's a ton of people. Everyone's happy. We're getting to compete. Like, it's cool. We're like, yeah, we've been putting in this work. We're all over dieted. Yeah. And so we got to compete, and backstage was a bit chaotic because they weren't ready for that many people. And I actually missed my pump up because you're trying to time it. You're backstage, you're trying to time everything. You've got your flights, you've got your ABCDs, and everything's moving along. And next thing you know, I'm all right. I'm looking over here and I'm like, okay, they're moving up. I've got about 2-3 minutes to maybe slam some Sour Patch Kids and start, yeah, and start going to town with pump, with some pump up game, and all of a sudden they changed things up a little bit. They immediately said, "All right, guys, you're next," and I'm like, "Wait, what?" Like, we were called on stage, and man, I was cold. Didn't really get a lot of blood flow, but still had a blast. Went out there, did a freestyle posing routine. I think we got a 30-second or a 45-second free flow routine. Managed to come back for finals, took second. And Colby did a great job. I think he brought in a little bit more conditioning with his legs, and he just I think he won in that respect. And we connected after the show as well. We connected, and we were both like, man, like, we walked off the stage arm in arm, like arm over each other's neck, because you're both exhausted. You're looking at each other. You're like, I don't know who won, but I know one of us did something great. Like, we're whatever. And a lot of camaraderie. Definitely my favorite show, simply because of the people I got to meet. I got to connect with some amazing people backstage, and friends that I'm actually coaching, at least 2 of them today. Like, to this day, one of them is a national level bodybuilder. He's amazing. He's huge. He's amazing. He was this big dude backstage. He walks up to me, and he's in bodybuilding, and he walks up. He's probably like 1.5 inches, 2 inches taller, and I'm looking up at him. I'm like, man, this guy's huge. He's like, hey, do you know when we're going on? He's like, you know when we're going on stage? I'm looking at him, and I'm like, me? I'm like, he's like, yeah. And I'm like, I'm classic, man. He looks at me. He's like, you're big for classic. So we have this, like, we just had such a cool dialogue, and I'm like, yeah, man, I'm just I'm 212. He's like, man, you're a big 212. And it was just such a cool experience. And from now on, his name's Caden, by the way. If he does end up seeing this, I'm calling him out. He's Caden. He's a great guy. And so yeah, we coach together now, and we have a great relationship, and there's quite a few people that I still stay in connection with. So that was the 3rd show, and that was my last one that I competed. They competed most recently. Yep. And all 3 of those were national qualifiers. And so I was able to, I've been 3 times nationally qualified at this point, sequentially. Yeah.
So you've taken the time to do your homework on really how human performance, nutrition, pharmacology, you go down the list, you've gotten the chance to experience this yourself, and now you have athletes and you have general health and wellness under your tutelage. So when we first started this conversation, we're like, hey, let's have you on the podcast. We talk about the trainer of the trainers. I see you consistently working with top level athletes, and I'll just leave it there because I don't want to put any names out there, because some of these, just to protect the innocent, and more importantly, you have developed a business based on the things that you went to work with, whether it be through other coaches, whether it be through your own research. And when I talk to you, I'm just fully enthralled, because I'm like, holy cow, you know your stuff. I did my homework on you. I said, hey, tell me about Jake with some of your clients. I want to know what you're getting from Jake, because when you trusted your coach on the yes or no, sir, you're essentially putting your life into their hands. What are some of the things that you noticed being, a good coach? Now, you're an amazing coach. What took you from good to excellent / top tier?
It's a great question. One, humility. I would say that the number one quality that a coach, one of the number one qualities that a coach should embrace is coming to the table with a humble mindset, and that you're never going to know it all. You will absolutely never know everything. You can know a lot. You can know as much as possible. Yeah, and you could do your best. Like, you could do your best to hours of research every night, but you're never, ever going to be prepared. A plan never survives the enemy, and the enemy is life. And so that you need to embrace humility. And I think any coach that at any level, if they are not practicing humility and that accepting the fact that you're not going to know it all, you never will. If they do that, I think they're immediately going to level up, because that opens up more gateways to outsourcing and connecting, or just brainstorming with your client, whether it's with your client or with someone else, collaborating to make something better, to make something even better than what you can bring alone. And I think what I see many coaches do is that they want to monopolize that. Oh, this is my athlete, this is my person, and I know what's best at all times. And that's just not true. And it's not true in any aspect of life, in any business. It doesn't matter. The president, the leader of a Fortune 500 company, it doesn't matter. You need a cabinet, you need people. And I think for me, what took me from, wherever I started to where people are considering that I'm a very good coach and high level, is leading with humility first, always putting the client first, and accept when you make a mistake and fix it, because that's your opportunity to learn. That's the opportunity to get better, to level up faster than everyone else, or faster than the average person, because everyone's going to make probably about the same amount of mistakes. But the difference between the people that rise to the top versus those that don't are the ones that learn from it and accept that it's okay to do that.
And let me just reemphasize this for the people in the back, because what you just said absolutely just hits me right in the heart. Coaches have coaches, which means you can always learn, and you never arrive at a destination. And what you've done, what I've seen with you, even in the short time that we've known each other and had conversations, you're always looking for the next thing as far as what to learn, not what to give to somebody. You want to make sure it's vetted, it's tried, it's true, it's proven. And I think that's one of the things that sets you apart from some of these higher level coaches, because people trust in you. Only people had good things to say about you. I've not heard one thing in a different way. So why did you take that approach? I mean, obviously there were times to where you could have said, look, I've placed top level in national shows. I know what I'm talking about. What have you seen in the sport? How has this changed your attitude based on the state of bodybuilding today?
That's a good question. Based on bodybuilding today, and what is it that really encouraged that change? So those things, they are connected, but I will say for me, I think it was ingrained pretty young. My first coach told me, he's like, Jake, no matter how good you get, there's probably a 13-year-old Chinese girl that can do better than you. And, and so, and so, he's just one of those guys that was really kind of rough and gruff, and made it a key part of my training and learning to always keep my head down and nose in the books, or ears open to bring in more information. And when you feel like because it happens, when you feel like you're swelling with pride, everyone does. Everybody's going to have these moments, whether you're in your job or in bodybuilding or no matter what, you're going to swell up with pride. Celebrate your victories. Yes, celebrate your victories. But at the same time, that energy can get out of control. And it's ultimately going to be a big deterrent for your success. And I didn't know that at a young age, but I had him in my ear so young that it stuck with me. It stuck with me to anytime I felt that, like, oh man, I'm doing great. Yeah, I'm doing awesome. That voice in the back of my head just said, nope, there's 13-year-old Chinese girl probably over there. That's better than you. And I just took that and parlayed it over into other parts of my life. Now, as to your question about bodybuilding and what I've seen and how that can kind of relate to that same topic of why I want to put people first and why learning is always so critical, is because I've seen this is a big one. It started before I ever started coaching. I had many other fellow athletes. They suffered similarly in that they went through crash diets. But they were some female athletes, and depending on your supplementation, if you're taking drugs or not taking drugs and things along those lines, your hormonal systems are going to respond differently, and the variables in your life that you're going to have to deal with are going to be very different. Okay, so I've seen some female athletes in particular, males too, but at the time it was primarily female athletes that I saw suffer the most because they had some incredible willpower. They pushed so hard in their prep. They were crying every day because their emotions and it was painful. It was hard. It was a hard process. And so not only emotionally and physically for everyone, males and females alike, but they were going through the ringer, man. And they did not have some of the pharmacology to bolster their hormonal systems. And they experienced some horrible ramifications from that over about a 3-year span. And I watched their health suffer. I watched some of them go to the ER. I watched because they were so depleted. Their electrolytes were so trashed after dehydrating. Their hormones were so crashed they weren't fertile for over 1.5 years after their show. They were trying to have children and they couldn't, and their bodies were never the same. They may have been a very fit human prior to the show. Afterward, their hormonal landscape changed, and it changed for the worse because hormones are a very beautiful and delicate system of rings that all work in conjunction with each other. And all of a sudden, when you shut everything down, it doesn't all shut down at the same time. And so this delicate system that started when you were a kid and has been running for years and years smoothly with small dips here and there because of sleep and food and whatever, all of a sudden just it stops because you're over dieted, you're overstressed, and maybe you put in some pharmacology that ended up throwing a wrench in there. And I saw coaches that didn't know what to do to bring them out safely or to even stop the process. Or I saw coaches that weren't even willing to say, hey, is this worth it? Is it worth it? Is this something you really need to go through in the long term? Are you willing to give up your fertility for the next 3 years? Or are you willing to give up your physique and deal with these hormonal struggles for the rest of your life to go through this process right now? And so it was a combination, because if a coach knows what they're doing, I do believe that someone can get down to a very lean condition and come out safely. I've seen it. We've all seen it. We've seen people do this professionally now, but it's in the other areas where coaches they're still learning, but they're not careful and they're not humble, and they trash people. and they destroy their hormonal systems. And I think I witnessed this firsthand, and it scared the shit out of me. Honestly, it scared me, and I have a heart for people, so I was upset. I'm like, why? Why is it that someone's not asking the right questions to just either stop this early or fix it? And that was before I was a coach. So I think I took that into my coaching.
Yeah. I'm going to ask this kind of selfishly because you've been a part of major shows. And, as athletes are going through, I hope that's a wake-up call for coaches, because this is probably an episode that will be talked about more than any other episode because we're keeping it real. And, when you think about a competitor who did their first show and all of a sudden they become a coach, no. Let's do the research. Let's get certified. Let's figure out how we're going to do this safely, because, if you want long-term in the sport, I think about a Dexter Jackson. I think about a guy, who's been on the highest level of stages, has won an Olympia, still continued, and even in his 40s, to compete. He did not have a career of 5 years. He's probably the longest, most successful bodybuilder that I know that continued to just continue to bring great level packages. So what do really athletes look for when they look to do a show? There's organizations out there. Some are tested, some are not tested, some are under a doctor's care, of course. Really, truly, in your opinion, what are some of the things that we can do as show promoters or as organizations to keep athletes not only safe, but also keep them coming back in a way that they feel good about it? I'd love to know your thoughts as far as what you've seen and what you've experienced in your shows and what you're seeing with your athletes and clients.
That's a good question. So what can promoters do? So just so I can clarify my thoughts, what can promoters do or people keep an eye out for to keep athletes safe, happy, and coming back? One, I think it's good to put the idea out there that it's a very hard, show preps are hard, right? Show preps are tough. They're very challenging. So keeping it real in that they're challenging, you're going to go through suffering, in that you're going to be hungry, you're going to be fighting your body's instincts to survive. You will. To get that lean, you're genuinely doing things that your body's like, nah, I don't want to do it. Like, you're telling me that I'm like dying of starvation right now, and you got to fight through that, and you got to train to lift weights, to hold on to your muscle mass. So there's a lot of things going on that you're going to get a lot of signals, and it's gonna suck. I think making sure that people know that life goes on, and that a show, while it is very important and it's a great challenge and it's fun and it can be a career, at the same time, you need to weigh. And I think even promoters can be very clear and be like, hey, yes, I want you to participate in this model. I want you to participate in this event because this is a great thing. But at the same time, is it the right thing for you? Is it the right thing for you to do right now? Be open and transparent with that. And I think you'll have even more competitors because they know that you're looking out for them. And I think it's just very clear cut. I think that there's a huge mentality around bodybuilding that it's lit like get lean or die trying. And it is. It's some of the stuff that and that parlays over into what people are willing to do, and the extreme drugs and the extreme approaches, and it's acceptable because of the culture behind it. And the pressure of no, they're not doing much. That's 1 gram a test. That's nothing. What? No, what? and that's where I think from the ground up, if people can communicate that there's an option, like, no, it's not get lean or die trying. It's, yes, this is a process you can go through. Yes, this is something that is challenging and you can get a lot from, but you need to weigh the consequences, because there are always consequences.
Good and bad.
Good and bad. Good and bad. And you have to own both. You have to celebrate the good and own the fact that, yes, those are good consequences. You got that marketing material, or you won that victory, and your career could be better for it, or that could be your career. That could be how you're paid, by being a great competitor and going to these shows that are paid. And that's amazing. That's amazing if that's your place in the world. If that's your place in the world. And you'll probably find out pretty quick if it is.
You know, you mentioned something. You said get lean or die trying, right? I think
Right.
about the way a show or an organization can set up their criteria. You know, I think about not the biggest and the most shredded is designed to win. Because if you're really going to be the biggest and you're not the biggest to start and you've got to do all this stuff to get big and then get lean, it's probably not healthy. And so I think about the way, you know, as I discuss this with judges, because I've had a lot of discussions, especially lately. What are we going to reward? We want to reward healthy. We also want to reward performance at the same time, right? We want to be able to have that aesthetically pleasing body. Why do we mark down for gyno? Why do we mark down for distension? Why do we mark down for these things that, you know, don't look normal or natural? However, we don't need the mass monsters. What we're finding out is the mass monsters are not necessarily the healthiest individuals in the world, and that can create complications later on down the road, if not short or long term. So as you go through, you know, why is it? Because I really, one thing I appreciated about when you were talking about competing, you placed where you placed and you were okay with it. And I think a lot of people think that they deserve first place because they came in X amount, but they don't know who's going to show up that day. So if you are a competitor or giving advice to one of your competitors, and let's say they place second or third, how would you console them, or how would you really work with their attitude or outlook to say, look, just because you placed X or Y and didn't win the show doesn't mean you're not good enough. It just means that somebody was better that day, because our judges are very experienced in what they do.
Yep.
How do you take an athlete like that, and how do you give kind of the outlook for them?
That's a great question. That's a great question. I think much of that comes down to, so it's not that it's a crapshoot. It's not. It's that there are criterion and there are variables that we got to manage, and all we can do is do your best, right? All we can do is bring the best you got. And someone might show up that's got a arbitrarily and subjectively prettier look. Like, it just is what it is. And yes, there are metrics. Yes. But at the same time, we have to keep it real in that if someone on stage, all of a sudden you're captivated because they're just beautiful. They're just beautiful to look at in every way. Physically, their face, their stage appeal, their sex appeal. It doesn't matter. Like, that all plays a factor. We're humans. Those are a lot of things that we can't change. Like, yes, you can get better at stage presence. You can get better at those things. And so I think what I'm trying to say is that there's so many variables there that addressing it from the beginning, when an athlete starts the prep and start cultivating the right mentality from the get-go, is very important. You can't address it too late, because otherwise I don't think there's much you can do about the fact that they're going to feel like they either deserved first or they didn't do good enough or whatever it is. The whole point is to help condition their minds to the fact that we live in a subjective world, and right now you're about to participate in what is art in action. Okay, and art in action means that you've got observers. Like, if you go to a museum and you've got people that are observing a picture, you could have one guy, they're all just as credentialed as the other. They've all got their whatever degrees in art or whatever of their own pieces, and they're sitting there staring at it. They're like, I hate that. I don't like that at all. And then you've got the other guy that's like, what do you mean? This is phenomenal. Like, this is incredible. Like, it's the same. Yes, there are metric systems, but that doesn't change what's going on in here. That doesn't change that judge could be looking at this, yes, as objectively as possible, but their impulse on the inside is like, no, that's not a good fit for me. We're human. And so we have to condition the athletes from the get-go to let them know that you're stepping into a world where you're going to be chosen or not simply because they choose to or not. There is no way for you to assure victory unless, I guess if it's this is another topic for maybe another episode of the political landscape. That's where you might be able to garner more favor in that you can guarantee your victory. But from a purely humanistic and point-based perspective, there's just too many variables that you're not going to be able to account for. You can bring your best, you can do your best, and you can bring in 7%, they can bring in 7%. You can bring in 5%, they bring in 5%. Just do but getting the mentality right from the beginning, and that should come before you ever start show prep.
Preach, dude. We have to get on another episode, because what you just said was so key. And I see all these competitors, who are chiming in, and they're like, this makes so much sense. Why hasn't anybody done this or said this?
Yeah.
So when you said 5% on you, by the way, looks different on 5% on me. And you know what? As you said, your quads were not your strongest suit. When you turned around from the back, game over. But when you turn around in the front and you've learned to develop your weaknesses into your strengths and balance out. So the balance and the expectation and the mental prep that coaches are able to do with their athletes and understanding, hey, everybody wants to win first place, but there's only one first place. And it doesn't matter. You could have the most striated glutes, but with somebody coming next to you, they could have a better V-taper with just as striated glutes, but maybe their back has more detail. Maybe they're thicker. Maybe they're wider. Maybe they're prettier. And so, golly, I mean, seriously, this is like the holy grail of this conversation. I had no idea it was going to go this way, but I'm sitting here grinning ear to ear because you've nailed it, dude. You have delivered and more. So if you don't mind me asking, because I think we need to keep that continued. I know that you've spent a lot of time researching. You've spent a lot of time, figuring out what it is that's going to be your best. And I'd like for you to know, because I know that you spent a lot of time researching supplements. You've launched your line. You actually have wildly popular type things that you're doing. Let's talk about you and why you started or launched a supplement line. What were you seeing with others, and why did you start yours?
That's a great question. A really, really good question. So, in my fitness / health history, I started working at a supplement shop when I was 17, and I have always, so having the struggles that I did, let's go back real quick, to, I had a lot of social struggles, right? Because of the issues with my brain. I was not very good at communicating. Social cues weren't something that I understood very well for a long time because my frontal lobe was genuinely affected by the hormonal imbalances in my brain. So weirdly enough, I was that guy that was like, you know what? Okay. So I'd already learned the power that my brain could adapt over time and that I could learn a lot. I could learn and change a lot. And so I started to pursue different environments that forced me to get good at communicating, that forced my brain to adapt and learn new skills. And so for me, I loved fitness. Supplements were intriguing. And at that time, I was like, ooh, what, I was scared of pharmacology. I was scared of different things, but you're on, every athlete's been there who's made that transition, whether you're natural or whatever we want to call natural. That's another episode.
Third episode.
Third episode, guys. Third episode coming up. When you're making that transition between, you don't know anything about the pharmacology world. You don't know anything about chemistry. So you're intrigued by supplements. You're like, oh, is this going to help me? Is this going to take my performance even higher? Because I was young, 16, 17 years old, strong. I mean, at the time, deadlifting probably, at 180 pounds, I was deadlifting 540. I mean, I was a strong kid and competing. And so I was trying to figure out how can I get better. So I got a job. Was I 17 or 19? It was my teen years. I got a job at Complete Nutrition in Tyler. And if, one of you guys might be watching this then. So
here we go.
Here we go. Complete Nutrition in Tyler, before they sold their franchise to Supplement Warehouse some years back. And I loved it, started to learn a lot and really enjoyed the industry. And at that time, it was a little more regulated. They had just started going from proprietary blends and really starting to transition into more transparent labeling. Not quite yet. They hadn't yet, but it was there. You had some brands that were like, hey, we're going to dabble in being more transparent. And then you had the others that were like, no, we're still going to put crack in ours. We're still gonna
literally.
We're still gonna put methamphetamine and other things in there. We're not gonna tell you about it. The old school mesomorph. Anyway, no.
Keep calling it
out. Sorry, I got a cough. And so I love the industry. I was fascinated by supplements and fascinated by how it could help. And I got really good at sales. I was really good at the process of communicating with people. I had been doing research for years and years on science, on the exercise science and general supplementation before I ever stepped into that world. So I went in hot. I went in with a really, really strong knowledge base and quickly moved up to management as a teenager and was the number 2 like sales rep in the lower part of the US. And I was only part-time. I was just a really, really good employee. And all because, and I'll attribute that all because I had great mentors. Okay. Yes, I did the work. Yes, I did the best I could, but at the same time, my mentors were awesome. And so I want to give that credit to them as well. And, but they exposed me to great sales techniques and learning how to develop a true connection to people. And that started everything with supplementation for me. And it went from there. I decided at that point to open my own line someday. I was like, all right, cool. Like I knew it. I was a teenager. I was like, man, this is so cool. I was working with the margins in the back of house, like with the profit margins. It's like, man, this is crazy. I was like, these supplements are great and you can make great money. You can help people. You can change like if you really make a good product that's got good ingredients in it, you can actually help someone and make a living. And that idea connected for me very strongly. I was like, I can do that someday. I don't know how. I don't know the process behind it, but I could do it. And so as we go forward and my wife and I grow and, we get out of poverty and we start to excel in our careers and things like that, I was in a position to do it this year. And I was like, you know what? I called one of my friends, Kendall, and Kendall actually owns his own brand and owned 3 other shops in Dallas. He owned his own shops in Dallas. I helped him launch one of his first brands. I was a national sales director for his brand. I was doing that on the side to help. And so I'd learned a lot about the industry. And I called him. I was like, hey, man, help me know what I don't know. Tell me what I don't know because I need help. And he was ready to go. He's like, I got you. He got you. Because when you love people, when you really, really love people and you do what you can for them no matter what. Because when I was helping Kendall, when I was working for him, I was broke as a joke, man. Like, and it's all relative. We've got people that make a ton of money, people that don't make a lot of money, whatever. But we were struggling a lot. We were struggling. But no matter what, I always showed up and did the best I could to build great relationships for his brand, because that's what you do. When you make a commitment and you make a promise, you do the best you can no matter what. And you serve others with everything you got. And I did. And he came back. Years later, 5-6 years later, he came back and he's like, I got you, man. So he linked me up with his manufacturer and I jumped in the game and made my pre-workout. And that's just the beginning. I hope to grow and go from a pre-workout to a hydrator and a sleep aid and things that I can really get my hands in and that I'm passionate about, and try to separate the market and do stuff that like, nope, that's a lie. That's a myth, and make things that really help. Yeah.
Well, I think you're well on the way. And for those of you who, want to follow Jake, first of all, IG v.jake, Jake.strain. And also you can follow Jacob Lee Salisbury on Facebook. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. That's correct. Yep.
Everybody
calls me Jake, but my real name is Jacob. Yeah.
There you go. And one of the things that I love is I can't wait to try it. So I know that, we were in the gym today and somebody said, hey, you got your stuff with you? I want to try it. And so that to me is the ultimate compliment that you've got. Oh, there it is. So what's it called? Throw it on the screen here.
Yes, sir. It is called Shifter. So like I'm a super nerd. So like werewolves, witches. Oh yeah. Shifter. Absolutely. And so, and that flavor is Patriot Potion. So it's like bomb pop. And I've got a sour gummy as well.
I cannot wait to try. Hopefully I might just be able to sneak a favor from you and say, hey, can I try that? So you might just see that on the in the gym one day. I'll be like, dude, I'm dragging. You're like, here, try this. So when I say that, I think that, as we extend part 2, because I know that we have gone through a wealth of information in just a quick 60 minutes. I would like to continue part 2 and part 3. And from what I got on feedback, as far as what I'm seeing on my screen, it's crazy because I can see the insights, the analytics, the comments. to me, you are a guy who needs to be seen and heard more, because not only do you have the information, your story is absolutely incredible. And, you know, I just have to say, this was probably one of the best episodes for me personally that I've gotten the chance to experience in the 53 episodes that we've had so far. Dude, I just can't thank you enough, Jake. And dude, you just brought the heat, man.
Man, I thank you. Just thank you for giving me the chance. If I could do anything, is just, I just try to be genuine and share what I can. And you're right, keeping it real. Got to keep it real, man. We're in a social media world that's designed and meant to hide things from us, unfortunately, and to give us the sleight of hand. And we got to do what we can to combat that.
No, you're exactly right. And, you know, for those of you who tuned in, feel free, follow Jake Salisbury. This guy is incredible. You're going to see him back on another episode soon, if he'll be back. And I just can't wait. So as we have Father's Day coming up, I know, happy Father's Day to all of you. You will also be seeing maybe some gym owners in about 5 weeks that we like to train at the same gym. You and I, they'll be on here and talking about steelworks with Gabe and Sam. That's going to be another table talk. We might even bring you into that conversation. I don't know. We'll see what we got. But dude,
I'm in.
Thank you so much. And I can't thank you enough for your time, also for your knowledge, as well as your friendship. And I have to say that, you know, you've always made time for people. And I think that's where people see your heart. And that's definitely something that people notice and pay attention to. So with that, thank you. We will see you guys next week, next Friday, 5:30 p.m. as normal. We will also be having a special intro. And you just got to pay attention to Friday Fitcast on Instagram, or you got to go to Friday Fitcast on Facebook, which you can find us on YouTube. Hit the subscribe button. It's a free subscription. You can go back and watch any of the replay. You can tape a clip. You can share it. You can edit it. You can take a look and give this to your friends, because more and more people need to hear it. So until then, have a great weekend. Thank you, Jake. We'll talk soon.
Bye, everybody.